Hello everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to ChasingCinema.com's official YouTube channel. My name is Jacob Tiranno, and thank you for tuning into my Week 11 update, or Week 10 update. Week 11 update. All the weeks are starting to blend together. I do know that this is a week late. I apologize for that. I'm uploading my Week 11 and Week 12 update together, back to back, because last week a lot of things happened, some personal issues. Then Batman vs. Superman came out, and things just got kind of crazy, so I apologize. But I'm glad that it was the video update that kind of didn't work out, but I still watched all my movies. Now, this week I did a themed week. I took on the Buzzfeed article, 19 seriously scary documentaries that will scare the hell out of you. Now, a few of these films I had seen, but I decided to take 6 of these movies and watch them. It was written by Anna Cropsey. I've linked it down here in the description box below. I'd recommend checking out these movies because after watching all of them, most of them have been really good, and then the few that I've seen on here that I didn't rewatch are really good. So make sure to check out that link again down here in the description box below. Also, make sure to find a review for Batman vs. Superman, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and my Week 12 update right here by clicking this white eye. Links will drop down, you'll be able to find that. But let's hop right into it. So, the first movie we're going to be talking about on this list is called Cropsey. And Cropsey was a co-directed documentary by Joshua Zeman and Barbara Branocchio. Probably butchered that last name, I'm sorry. But this is a movie that focuses on urban legend that, in a way, came true. They fall around, it's about these two filmmakers who kind of follow this story of 5 missing children, and how there was a link to this story that became an urban legend on Staten Island. And this movie is quite terrifying. Like, this movie is not just a documentary. It's very much a horror film. It's really unsettling. It's eerie. But it is thought-provoking. That sometimes real life is scarier than the horror movies. Now, I don't think this was one of the best documentaries from this list, but I do think it was effective. And it is quite sad because, we're dealing with real life, and we hear these legends. We hear about these characters. And to fill you in, Cropsey is a character that lives in Staten Island in the woods. He escaped the mental hospital, and he's a crazy man that snatches children out of the woods on Staten Island. And it is quite creepy, and some of the footage you see in this movie is really haunting. I mean, it's definitely not for someone who is easily freaked out or terrified, but I think it really skillfully explores folklore and why we tell these stories, while it also focuses on the disappearance of a missing girl and a few other children. But a very effective and very creepy movie. I try to watch all these movies late at night by myself in the dark, just to try to keep up the tones, and this one was one that really kind of messed with me. The Following Night was also directed by Joshua Zeman, in a sort of sequel to Cropsey, and that is called Killer Legends. So instead of focusing on one, Killer Legends focuses on multiple urban legends. Again, kind of keeps up the urban legend themes and really talks about the stories behind these urban legends. It addresses tainted Halloween candy, killer clowns, which it talks about John Wayne Gacy. It talks about the town that dreaded sundown and the Hook Man and the murders that took place in the small town of which I cannot remember the title of. But which is really good. It's more of an interesting documentary than it is terrifying. I don't think in any way it's as scary as Cropsey. It doesn't really kind of dive you into each of these. It's more of like, let's do some research and let's talk about urban legends and where they form from. And though I think it's very interesting, especially if you're into crime documentaries, it really kind of misses though what made Cropsey great, which is that it feels so haunting. But nonetheless, I think that it is creepy, and it is very, very interesting. If you're a crime fanatic, especially crime documentaries, you're gonna love this. It's just really interesting. It talks about some really fascinating cases, some really scary cases that are like, oh my god, that really did happen. For instance, the Halloween candy section of the movie is really, really interesting. The Following Night. I know, it's so depressing. Like, people always ask me, you should do more themed weeks, which I'm starting to implement. But like, for instance, watching these scary documentaries for the whole week straight, it was really tough. But anyway, Dreams of a Life, the 2011 film directed by Carol Morley. This one was not scary, but really depressing. I found this movie to be really heartbreaking. It starts off really strong and intriguing, but it does lose momentum and kind of becomes frustrated. This movie tells a story of a woman who died alone in her flat, and Joyce Vincent, and 2003, and her body wasn't discovered for 3 years. And this movie kind of goes on talking about how this woman literally had no one looking for her for 3 years. Like, it took 3 years for someone to come and find her, and it's really sad. Like, it was just a really sad movie. And to be honest, I thought it was more of a hour special story, or something that could have been broken down in a 90 or 60 minutes episode, or 2020. But it didn't feel like it had the power to be a movie. It felt like afterwards it became longer and more like just really reaching. They try to use a lot of recreation to help tell the story, but it just feels really unsatisfying when you get to the kind of end of this movie. I think the story is interesting, but the execution from Carol Morley really kind of just fell flat. I know it was done. I believe Carol Morley is a journalist as well, and it feels that way. Like, it feels like a journalistic point of view, but it really lacks that storytelling. Besides all these interviews, I mean, it's just a lot of interviews, people talking at their interactions with this woman, and it just would have worked in a much shorter sense. Okay, so I said 6 movies from this list, 19 seriously scary documentaries that will scare the hell out of you, written by Anna Cropsey, because one of the days, of course, I had to watch Allegiant, the new film from the Divergent series, and you could find my review for that. Clicking that white eye, drop down, you'll find the video review for that, because this movie was awful. Wow. It is by far the worst movie in the Divergent series franchise. Characters are stupid, story is weak, and effects are downright awful. I honestly thought this movie was brought to us by the Sci-Fi Channel. But the difference is, Sci-Fi Channel tends to do these movies on a much lower budget, and sometimes even on purpose, where this movie, I think, really did try to look pretty. I mean, the fact that it has awful special effects, which is should be the saving grace for these movies. I don't think I've liked any of the Divergent movies. But at least I was like, well, the effects were good. Not in this one. I mean, this has some really, really bad effects. Characters are doing the same thing that they've done in other movies. Shailene Woodley, who really has nothing to work with, is a character that is falling for the same stuff again. Someone who promises they will save the situation, and they're foolish enough to fall in that trap again. Miles Teller as well. I mean, it's just it was really, really bad. Probably one of the worst movies I've seen so far this year. Not Dirty Grandpa bad, but it was pretty bad. Moving on in the week, day 75, I watched a movie that's scary, but not scary like Kill Legends or Cropsey. No, this movie is scary for a different reason, and that's because it's real, and it has to do with our government and people that should be protecting us and serving justice. And that's Kids for Cash. This movie was made in 2013, directed by Robert May, and it is a look at the judicial scandal that took place when a few judges were found to be taking bribes to send kids to private institutions. And not kids that are committing crimes, like crimes. Kids who are getting in trouble at school, jaywalking, and they're going to private institutions for a year and a half. I can't even remember some of the ridiculous things that these kids were thrown in jail for, but I mean, horrible things were happening to these kids who did stupid kid things. And some of you might be saying, yeah, well, sometimes kids got to be taught a lesson. Well, not like this. I mean, kids who don't deserve it are being punished to a degree where, some kids who shouldn't even be in the realm of thinking are suffering by this. Petty crimes. And it really affects some of these people's lives. I think it is important and really gut-wrenching to be like, oh my God, these are people that have power and that should be doing good for our kids in community. They should be teaching these kids lessons so they could get out of the system, not putting them in the system. I mean, these judges, to earn a couple dollars on the side, are putting kids into the system, which is near impossible for them to get out of. These kids are very, very harmed by this. Some kids get addicted to alcohol and drugs, and a lot of the stories are quite sad. It will anger you, it will shock you. It does have its flaws, but it's a well-made advocacy film. It's supposed to piss you off. It's supposed to make you watch in anger, and it puts everything out there for you to watch. Really, really sad stuff. The following film was a favorite of mine out of the 365-Day Movie Challenge, and this was The Imposter, a movie from 2012 directed by Bartlett, and that told one of the most stirring movies I've seen all year. Easily one of the best documentaries I've ever seen made. It is so thrilling that I felt like half the movie, the hairs on my neck were standing up. I was glued. I kept making, my girlfriend was in the room. She's like, why do you keep making these? Because she's playing a game on the computer. And I was like, oh, what? No way. And I'm just making all these comments, and she's just so, just so like, what's going on? That she ended up having to stop playing her game because she watched a bit of it in the beginning and just had to finish it. It is the execution from the direction that makes this movie good. Like, this is a perfect example of why Dreams of a Life wasn't good, is that this filmmaker knew how to tell a story. He uses reenactments. He uses stylish transitions and these great ways of retelling this movie, this amazing story, to make it so suspenseful and so mysterious. It's a movie that will stay with you long after you've watched it. This is a movie that I've not stopped talking about, and I watched it a week ago, and I plan on getting people to watch it because it's so yeah, I think for one of my gifts, I tweet all of my reviews for these movies at jacobtoronto.com, at jacobtoronto right here, you'll see down here, that it just plucks at every single emotion, and I think I use the gif of Kramer, because that's how I feel. I don't even want to tell you what this movie's about, because if I do, it'll minorly hurt how good this movie is. So if you have Netflix, go watch The Imposter. Don't read the description, just click play, and you're welcome. Great movie. 4 out of 4 stars. I mean, just wow. It is so good. Make sure to check it out. And the last film I watched from the 19 Seriously Scary documentary list from Buzzfeed writer Anna Cropsey was The Central Park 5, which is another movie that is kind of a gripping film about injustice. In 1989, 5 black and Latino kids were convicted of raping and beating a woman in Central Park. And they spent 6 to 13 years in prison, and find out they didn't do it, right? Now, it's not just like the cops, or it's not just like a mistake of they were, this whole movie is kind of about the injustice that happens to these kids and how every rule in the book was broken when these kids were interviewed and analyzed and all these things. It's just kind of how it really shines light on the downfall of the justice system. But not only the justice system, but the media, and how the media takes things and how it blows it up, and how, racial angles. I mean, this happened a long time. I mean, not long, but 1989. And, they talk about how race plays such a big part in it. And, it's just this really eye-opening movie. It was directed by Ken and Sarah Burns. And talks about this really true story about these guys who were just injusted, right? And now some, if you see this movie, might find it a little bit controversial, might find it polarizing if they were actually injusted or not. But the more you watch this movie, the more you just see how precautions were not taken, how rules were not followed. And you can't help to think wow, people weren't really doing the jobs. A lot of the people involved in the case, including the NYPD, did not want to be involved in this movie, but it does not stop it from being very compelling and really heartbreaking, I think the best way to put it. But a very good movie. It does have its flaws, and it's not as good as The Imposter, but it's still a really quite captivating movie. It's really interesting that the movies that the BuzzFeed list classified as scary were scary because it's things that we should really be scary of. We shouldn't be afraid of the boogeyman, but we should be afraid of maybe the justice system, or things that really do happen in real life. And I'm not saying that the whole justice system is a failure. I'm not making any, but I mean that's the themes of these films. Whether I believe them or not, that's what these movies are saying. That's going to wrap it up for week 11. You can find my week 12 update clicking this white eye. Back to back, like I said, make sure to go check that out, as well as my review for Batman vs Superman, my Big Fat Greek Wedding, and the Divergent series. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jacob Tiranno. Make sure to hit the like button, comment, let me know how you feel about these films. Again, please watch The Imposter, and don't look up anything about it. Just go in blind. I promise you it won't be a waste of your time. Also, hit that subscribe button so you can find all of our movie reviews and week updates. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jacob Tiranno, and please continue chasing cinema.